So by way of a background in terms of the history and evolution of interbody materials, I'm going to request control here, and I'll just start with, this is a quote from Ralph Flower that I found particularly useful when he talks about the ideal interbody material. He suggested that the ideal operation, mechanically efficient for fixation of a vertebral joint after rupture of a disc, is to actually restore that disc space, and if possible, immobilize the segments with a strong intervertebral wedge graft. And Ralph Flower was really one of the first to develop the interbody, the posterior-based interbody. Christoph, if you'd advance that, it looks like I don't have control of the screen right now. If you'd advance that.
Yep, it's advanced.
And so Flower described the posterior lumbar interbody fusion. And Flower actually initially was in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then he moved on to Hawaii, where he did a lot of his work during the war in Hawaii. He was a neurosurgeon. He developed a large number of tools for posterior-based interbody fusions, and he had used allograft primarily to fill that space. And these are some X-rays, and one of his early published studies suggesting overall very good long-term results for interbody fusions with a low rate of non-union with using allograft in the interbody space. Dr. Brannigan then was one of the early developers of a interbody fusion cage, and his early cage was made out of carbon fiber material, and that material was studied for a long time before it actually had a commercial debut, but was used for quite a long time. I think those of us who have used carbon fiber recognize some of the strengths and problems of carbon fiber, including relative fragility and the fact that it can break, as well as it can wear poorly. Christoph, if you can advance that for me, I think I'm unable to advance it. There we go. And next, I was going to just bring up the work that Paul Harmon had done, and specifically looking at the anterior approach and creating a dowel in the anterior spine, cutting out both bone as well as disc. And his diagrams were really quite fantastic. Some of this historical review I've also borrowed from my colleague, John Dymar, who's done a terrific job looking at some of the history of spine surgery. And these wonderful illustrations are from Harmon's work describing taking out a dowel of disc and bone and then putting an autogenous bone as an interbody spacer. Go ahead on to the next graph. That autogenous dowel was then evolved and changed into synthetic material, including the titanium BAK cages, as well as the ray cage that could be used either as an anterior interbody device or a posterior interbody device. Go ahead on to the next slide, if you would. There were significant rates of subsidence with some of these interbody cages when they were used as standalone devices, either anteriorly or posteriorly. So when we think now, going into present day, what the spectrum of materials that are available to us, there's really a broad spectrum. And this includes titanium materials as well as PEEK composites. This is an article, the lead author was Ralph Mobbs, about spine interbody implants and some of the considerations with regard to material selection, modification, and functionalization, and the bioactivity of some of these surfaces. And I recommend it as a very good overview of some of the interbody devices that we're using today. When we think about innovative approaches to interbody technologies, the burden of proof for what we really want to have for an interbody device is we want to fundamentally have something that improves fusion rates, improves fusion rates over existing static interbody devices. We want to avoid cage subsidence, and cage subsidence has a lot to do with the modulus elasticity of the material. And the ideal material will actually facilitate bone growth. It'll be compatible with imaging, so we really don't want something that's got a very dense radiographic footprint that's going to obscure our ability to visualize the interbody graft. We want to have a modulus elasticity that's similar to bone, so we don't have subsidence of our implants. And biomechanical properties that, again, will avoid subsidence over time. And certainly cost becomes an issue that we're all increasingly aware of. Some of the materials that have really been well studied include titanium, and this is some work comparing porous titanium, actually nanoporous titanium, to peak. And one of the observations here made by Barbara Boyan and others is that the titanium, specifically nanoporous titanium, creates a biological environment that is really more favorable to peak. And specifically in this biological environment, there's more BMP, there's less inflammatory cytokines, and more BMP as well as more BMP2 as well as 4 and 7 in the biologic environment around the interbody cage or between the interbody cage and bone. There's an upregulation of osteoblasts in the presence of nanoporous titanium. And that really results in a direct interaction between cells and the material at a molecular level. There are other forms of titanium that have been very successful in the past in terms of interbody grafts, and certainly we all recognize the role of porous titanium in our hip and knee implants and our acetabular cups. And so applying porous titanium certainly has been used in the spine as well, with properties that are very strong regarding ingrowth. And go ahead to the next slide there, if you would. And we studied this, actually go back one if you would, Christoph, we studied this in a sheep model looking at the favorable results of the porous titanium interbody cage in a sheep model compared to peak or even titanium-coated peak. Go ahead to the next slide. And now in terms of an evolution, what we're dealing with now and what this conference is going to focus on is some of the peak composites. And some of these composites can include porous peak, HA impregnated peak, as well as peak with aluminum silicate. And the idea here of some of the peak composite grafts is that overall these have some measurable advantages. They're more hydrophilic than standard peak. They've got perhaps some activation of our immune system and immunomodulation that may drive the reparative pathway compared to the inflammatory pathway, and increased osteoblastic response. So again, just as we had seen with the nanoporous titanium, some of these materials, some of these peak composites can also have some activity in terms of increasing BMP expression and reducing our inflammatory cytokine expression.